Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in a few minutes. We're just waiting for everybody to join in. All right, it's the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. This is our fifth webinar for our Colorado Safe Routes to School series. Welcome. My name is Kori Johnson. I'm the Program Support Manager here at Safe Routes Partnership. And today we are talking all about Safe Routes to School action planning and sustainability. And I'm joined by my colleague, Michelle Lieberman from the partnership, along with Tammy DeWolf from Cañon City, Colorado. And I will introduce them more formally in a moment. So for those of us who don't know about Safe Routes to School or Safe Routes Partnership, our mission is to advance walking and rolling to and from schools in everyday life, improving the health and well-being of people of all races, income levels, and abilities, and building healthy, thriving communities for everyone. Our vision is that we know that our bodies were designed to move, yet many of our communities were created with intentional inequities that limit mobility. We believe change is necessary to achieve a vision of safe, active, equitable, and healthy communities, urban, suburban, and rural, for everyone. And as I mentioned, joining me today, we have Michelle Lieberman, who is our Director of Consulting and Program Support here at Safe Routes Partnership. We also have Tammy DeWolf, who is a retired educator and school principal from Cañon City, Colorado. So we're very lucky to have a school administrator voice on our webinar today. And Tammy has a lot of experience and expertise that she'll be able to share with you all. So we're looking forward to hearing from her as well. So a few housekeeping items before we get started. To the left is the GoToWebinar viewer through which you can see the presentation. To the right is the GoTo control panel where you can raise your hand, ask questions, and select the audio mode you'll use. Please note that your control panel will collapse automatically when not in use. So to keep it open, you can click the View menu and uncheck Auto Hide Control Panel. You have a few different audio options for today. You can either listen by telephone or by the computer, microphone, and speakers. If you have sound problems with one selection, just try the other option, and we will do our best to field any issues. Just send us a chat message through the chat box. And speaking of questions, even though you're muted, we want to hear from you. We would like your input and participation. So please use the questions box to ask speakers questions for the Q&A portion of the webinar, which will take place after all the speakers have presented. We'll try to answer your questions if there's time at the end. Today's webinar is also recorded and will be available online. We'll provide a link in a follow-up email so you can refer back to it or share it with colleagues who weren't able to attend today. And we'll also put the presentation slides on our website as well. And today's agenda. So we are talking all about Safe Routes to School action planning and sustainability. So we'll start off by talking about creating and implementing a Safe Routes to School action plan, followed by our Colorado highlight and talking about action planning in Cañon City around Safe Routes to School. We'll also share some resources for creating your own action plan, followed by Q&A and reminders. And I think that the action planning and sustainability piece is pretty timely since we're kind of moving into your upcoming grant cycle for Safe Routes to School Colorado. So hopefully what you hear today will be able to help you and inspire you during that process. So we're gonna kick off with a short poll, and we would like to hear from you. Let's see, 1 second. About what is your experience with creating a Safe Routes to School action? What is your experience in creating a Safe Routes to School action plan? So have you created one before, or is this something that is new to you? So take a moment and please respond in the way that is appropriate to you and your experience, and then we'll close it out and get started. So you have almost everybody. We're waiting for a few more responses. Looks like we're about a lot of people who are just doing this for the first time. We have a few people who have some experience creating safe routes to school action plans, so that's good. All right, so if you haven't voted, take about 5 more seconds before we close this poll out and keep it moving. Alrighty, so thank you for sharing your experiences. So it seems like we have a lot of newcomers on today, which is great. We hope you'll be able to get some ideas to help you out with this process for the first time. And those of you who've created safe routes to school action plans, again, we hope that this will re-energize you and inspire you, and also give you some new ideas to take into your next action planning process. So the first thing we're going to be talking about today is creating and implementing a safe routes to school action plan. So I'm going to kick us off a bit by talking, again, just generally about action planning, how to get started, how to implement it, what to include in your action plan. And as I mentioned before, hopefully this will be a great kickoff as you start thinking about your action plans for the upcoming Safe Routes to School grant cycle. So we're going to kind of start with the basics about what is an action plan. So an action plan is your program blueprint, and having a solid action plan can make your program stronger and more sustainable. It usually outlines specific tasks and activities linked towards reaching a specific goal or a set of goals. So I know sometimes we create these really big, elaborate goals for ourselves, and it can be a bit overwhelming. And having an action plan can kind of make things seem a bit more manageable, and kind of breaking things down into short-term goals and long-term goals, as opposed to just going right into the big, lofty, pie in the sky goals. So plans are also important because they prevent things like this image that we are looking at of the bridge that's not connecting. So I think we've kind of all been in situations where we feel like we don't really know what's coming next. Even thinking about now with COVID and school reopening, we're all trying to figure out like how to prepare and how to plan for something that's really uncertain. So while having a plan is not a foolproof assurance that things will go the way we want them to, they can help us stay on track and stay goal oriented. So plans can give us direction and guidance that we know where we're going and how we can get there without getting derailed. And plans can also bring a sense of comfort and confidence that we can actually reach our goals and get to where we want to go. So there are also some other benefits of having a Safe Routes to School action plan. They can be great for community engagement and figuring out what people's needs are and what their priorities are. Plans can also give a solid foundation so your program can be long-term and sustainable. A lot of plans are created in collaboration with community partners and key stakeholders, so a plan can help strengthen those relationships and define people's different roles and responsibilities within your Safe Routes to School programs, along with putting in different accountability measures. And the planning process can also help work through program challenges, like if you want to start a walking school bus program for Safe Routes to School, but you realize that you don't have appropriate sidewalks in that neighborhood where you want to do the program, then you can use part of the action planning process to kind of work through those challenges or those barriers, so that you can put the programs into place that you actually want to put in. So with Safe Routes to School action planning specifically, there are a few different steps we kind of talked about when organizing this plan and putting it together. So the first step is assessing the current conditions, so figuring out, okay, where are we now? The next step is setting goals and timelines. So where do we want to go and how long will it take to get there? And then we start outlining specific strategies and actions. And again, that's the part about how do we get there? What is this actually going to look like? So thinking about things like your program structure, incorporating the 6 E strategies, policy strategies, community engagement strategies, all of those will help work towards putting that plan into action. The next step is exploring funding sources. So what will we need to reach our goal? where and how can we get these resources? Collaborating with community partners, as I mentioned, so who will help us reach our goal and implement this plan? And then lastly, reevaluating and revising. So how will we know if we actually achieved our goal and if we were able to put our plan into place the way that we wanted it to? And then how can we keep things moving? So how can we, keep going for next time? So I'm going to walk through this process step by step and give you some examples of what each phase of action planning can look like within a safe routes to school context. So assess current conditions. So obviously, before deciding where you want to go, we have to evaluate where we are now. So this is a great opportunity to engage your community and do a bit of reflection about your program and the community and the neighborhood and the school, and thinking about like what things look like now. So assessing current infrastructure, collision history, reviewing current plans and policies around safe routes to school or wellness, looking at student travel data, community demographics, and health and wellness data. Just kind of give a nice overview of the current situation, so you know where you want to go and maybe some areas that you want to work to improve. So the next piece is setting program goals and your timeline. Oftentimes we talk about creating goals that are SMART, so that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So when we think about safe routes to school programming, sometimes people kind of look into the next, 6 months. What do you want it to look like? What do you want it to look like in the next year? What do you want it to look like in the next 2 years? So figuring out a good time frame from your action plan is a great way to get started. Recent trends have been leading more towards short-term action planning, just because things change so quickly and there are all these unexpected things that can come up. So even if your plan is, just looking to the next, 6 months or a year instead of, the next 5-10 years, that's great. So don't be afraid to have your, timeline be a bit shorter. And the next piece is outlining specific strategies and actions. So what are the things that will actually help you, help you achieve the goal that you want to achieve? And so for safe routes to school planning, you kind of break down these actions and strategies into a few different categories. So as I mentioned before, program structure, strategies around the 6 E's, policy strategies, and community engagement strategies. And so I'm going to walk through each one and give you some concrete examples of what this can look like within an action plan. So for program structures, we know that programs look different depending on your school or your district, or your community. Some programs are run in a school, some are run out of local government agencies or nonprofit partners. So thinking through the program structure strategies that work best for you is a really important part of action planning. So asking questions about, who's going to be the lead organizer of this, who's going to be involved in making decisions around safe routes to school programming. Is it the coordinator? Is it a principal? Is it the local transportation agency? Who's going to be, a decision maker for how this program will be run? And then how can the different groups and stakeholders actually coordinate to make sure that everything is cohesive and everybody is on the same page? So these are a few sample program strategies and actions. I won't go through all of them because there's kind of a lot, but as I mentioned before, we can kind of think about action planning based on different timelines. So a year 1 goal could be, just doing some outreach to school principals and parent groups to generate interest, and kind of getting people on board and getting that community buy-in. That could be one goal you could have for your first year, just kind of starting to develop those relationships. And then if you want to include a year 2 in your action plan, you can think about ways to, expand that outreach, deepen that outreach, deepen relationships, maybe thinking about different ways to conduct outreach, scheduling trainings for school staff, family members, creating more materials about safe routes to school. All of those strategies and actions can be a part of your program structure arm for your action plan. So the next component are the safe routes to school strategies and actions. So how can we incorporate those E's into concrete activities that can help us reach our action plan? planning goals. So, you know, again, just a few questions to consider, you know, everything from how can you evaluate your program to how can you encourage students and families to walk and roll to school. That 6 E's framework, again, provides a nice structure for thinking through what this can look like, and, you know, incorporate something that's already a part of Safe Routes to School. So a few sample action strategies and actions for year one. For example, engineering. A lot of people like to start out with conducting some walk and bike audits around schools and neighborhoods. That could be a strategy to kind of get your, you know, get the engineering part of your action plan up and running. You know, even things like creating materials and languages spoken by students and families, and thinking about that equity E, that could be a concrete strategy related to, you know, like reaching a goal that you have set for yourself and your program. And then, you know, moving into year two, you know, again, how can you deepen? How can you expand? So maybe you start with maybe you want to start with one walk audit year one, and then year two, you want to kind of branch out and do maybe 3, or maybe establish a walking school bus program in more schools, or do more community outreach. So again, that year two can be an opportunity to expand and deepen the work. So next we have policy strategies and actions. So we talked a bit about Safe Routes to School policy in our last webinar, and policy again can be a part of creating a Safe Routes to School action plan. So thinking about you know, what policies are already in existence and how can you incorporate Safe Routes to School policies into a district wellness plan or a comprehensive plan. How can you build program consistency between different schools and neighborhoods, and how can different stakeholders work together to ensure program success? So sample policies, policy strategies and actions for a year one action plan could be something like trying to pass a Safe Routes to School resolution, developing a plan to implement Safe Routes to School programs in your city's comprehensive plan. I mean, your year one action could even be just you trying to sit down and figure out what policies already exist in your community. Sometimes, you know, trying to sort through all of that and dig through all of that and find out what exists and what doesn't exist is a task itself. So your year one plan might just be, you know, doing a policy assessment in your community. You know, and then year two can be about moving again and working, you know, continuing to work with your, you know, Safe Routes to School stakeholders, you know, trying to get some more formal policies in place, maybe encouraging your school district to fully adopt a Safe Routes to School policy, you know, updating current plans. So again, it's about expanding and deepening the policy work that's already in place. So next are community engagement strategies. And again, how will you engage your community will be a really important part of your action plan. So how can you ensure that community voices are heard, especially those who will be most impacted by the decisions that are made? How can you create space to work alongside community members? How can you create opportunities for all people to engage in your program? And actually, Tammy and Michelle will speak a bit more about what this looks like in action during their presentation. So hold on for more information about that. And so a few sample community engagement strategies. You know, year one, you might just want to attend a lot of community meetings, both in and out of school, to get a sense of what are the different groups in the area, who's doing what, who needs what. Even taking walks around, you know, like the neighborhood where you work or live, you know, taking walks, drives, bike rides, getting on scooters to kind of understand a bit more about the what students and families might be experiencing as they travel to school. So a lot of kind of, I guess, research could be a part of year one. And then moving into year two, again, thinking about how to deepen those interactions and connections within the community. So do you want to develop a Safe Routes to School task force, or a student-led Safe Routes to School group, or hosting a Safe Routes to School town hall event, or putting information in the school newsletter? All of those things might be, you know, nice year two goals. And I guess there might be some of you, you know, on who already have, you know, like pretty solid Safe Routes to School programs. So some of the things that I mentioned for year two here could be your year one, because you've already done a lot of the groundwork in establishing your program. So again, it's whatever works best for you. And of course, there's funding. So coming up with goals and ideas is great, but we have to make sure that we have the funding and resources to actually do all of this. So take some time in your action planning process to explore different funding opportunities, whether those are grant programs, state funding, local organizations, even just like local champions in your community who might want to donate resources or time to you. Make sure to include that as a part of your action planning process, because they'll keep you, I guess it'll give you a realistic idea of what's possible and what you can actually achieve. And then I also mentioned before that collaboration with community partners is really key, because Safe Routes to School relies so much on the ideas and energy of so many people. So how can you bring everybody along into the process? And it can also just make things feel less overwhelming for you, because you create this huge plan and you're like, oh, I have to do this all by myself. And being able to know that you have partners and team members to help you through this process and implementation can just make the process in general a bit more pleasant and less overwhelming. So students, parents, caregivers, teachers, school staff, nonprofit partners, crossing guards, government agencies, whoever's in your community or in your crew, make sure to include them in the action planning process. And then lastly, at the end of the process and implementation cycle, take a moment to reevaluate and revise. So like I said before, having a plan is not a guarantee that things will run smoothly or run as intended. So taking the time to reflect and revise is key. So this can help you, revise a current plan, or maybe you want to get rid of your old plan completely and start a new one. But creating the time and space to do this, preferably with your community partners and stakeholders, is key to making sure that things can continue to move forward and just be sustainable. So that is my pretty general overview of action planning within a Safe Routes to School context. And I do have another poll for you all. So based on everything that we've heard about Safe Routes to School programming, action planning that I just talked about, we want to hear from you about what parts of Safe Routes to School action planning do you think will be the most challenging? So will it be developing program strategies, developing the 6E strategies, developing policy strategies, getting schools and communities on board, developing community engagement strategies? There's not an option for all of it, but it might be, it might all feel a bit daunting, which is totally fine. Okay, so we have about half of our responses in. Okay, someone put funding, which is not one of the options, but yes, funding is definitely, definitely a big one. All right, so I'm going to close this in about 10 seconds. So if you haven't responded, please take a moment to do so. And so it looks like getting school and community support is a big one. Same thing with developing those community engagement and policy strategies. And I just mentioned somebody also mentioned funding as something that could be challenging too. So we don't want getting school and community support to be a challenge for you, but we hope that our next speaker can give you all some insight on what Safe Routes to School planning looks like on a school level. So I am going to introduce our next speaker, who is Tammy DeWolf. And let's get our presentation up. So Tammy is a retired Cañon City Schools elementary school principal and wonderful Safe Routes to School champion. She has 30 years of experience in public education, and she was the 2017 Colorado National Distinguished Principal of the Year finalist. So Tammy has done a lot of work with putting together Safe Routes to School action plans, and will be able to share her perspective as an educator and school administrator. So please welcome Tammy. Tammy, thank you so much for being a part of this and for sharing your expertise, and you're welcome to go ahead and get started.
Okay, thank you, Kori. Everyone, I first want to say, I respect the fact that you're here at this webinar today, because that tells me that you have a passion to help kids. And that means the work you are about to do or are in the middle of doing is worthy work. everyone wants to support our children in healthy lifestyles. So I thank you for being here, and you are about ready to dive into some work that can really make a difference. Over the next quarter of a century, the work that you do potentially could be that long lasting. So glad to be with you today, and let's get after it. I approach this presentation today, if you could advance the slide for me, Kori, thank you. I approach this presentation today from a practical standpoint. I was the physical education teacher and principal in a school of approximately 275 children, and that school was in a small rural community in Colorado. We did not have the infrastructure to support safe routes to school. We already knew, in terms of the infrastructure, that children traveling to and from school, it was unsafe. I want you to take a look at those photographs on the left-hand side of this slide. I want you to remember these two photographs, because we're going to come back in a couple of slides and show you the difference. Do you see our kids walking to school on a walk to school day with our police officers and parents, and they are walking in the middle of the street? Take a look at that school sign. That school sign has cars in front of it. You can, only see half of it. Look at our bike riders. They are riding their bikes down the middle of the road with traffic surrounding them 360 degrees, totally unsafe situation. It took me 30 years to get this project done and run a school for 15 years after being the physical education teacher. So I'm excited that you guys are getting after this type of work, because 30 years of hundreds of kids coming to school in unsafe side traffic conditions really is unacceptable, and it took us way too long to get this done. So I'm excited that you're here, and from my standpoint, we applied for an infrastructure, Safe Routes to School grant in 2016. So that was about 4 years ago. That's the experience that I bring to you today. I'm on the back side of this implementation. In year one, who leads this massive project? If you are starting from the infrastructure standpoint, or if you have that set up and you are beginning from the programming standpoint, leadership makes a difference. So when you're developing your action plan and thinking about sustainability, get the gatekeepers and the leaders on board that have a passion to do this job well and do this job right. You get the right people in place, you design the right action plan, and you are going to get results. That year one, we broke it down like this. Year one, who's going to lead it? Not only the lead person, but then the leaders within, in terms of benchmarking goals. Survey results, that will help define what your needs are. We always assess in schools. You never do anything without assessing in schools. So survey results are a must. Identifying what those needs are, collecting photographs and statistical evidence is one of the key components in the first year before you even actually submit the grant. Year two, you're going to write and submit the grant, and you're going to make certain that you have the support letters and the collaborative partnerships to make certain that this program is going to be successful. Action planning, that's what the webinar is today. So in the Safe Routes to School infrastructure grant, there's two main components. One is infrastructure, getting the concrete, curbing, sidewalks, school signage relevant and designed. And two, the educational component, to have kids, parents, families using those sidewalks that you have just built. So I'd like to take you through an authentic grant section 3 and 4 of the action planning and sustainability goals that we wrote in our grant. Kori, next slide, please. So in section 3, it begins with a project timeline and then a proposed timeline. You will see here, and I've highlighted the key components that we decided to put into our grant. Getting CDOT, resident engineer, Region 2 local agency coordinator, the city engineer, principal of the school together and on the same page and all bought in to making this program a success and this project work, then not only do we talk about it, but they give letters of written support that they approve the fact that this is a worthy project and it needs to be done. In terms of timeline, collaborative work with the stakeholders is vital. PTOs, accountability, parents, students, principal, city engineer, a lead parent, work, safe routes to school workshops, whether it's in person or a webinar such as this, designing a conceptual design with all of the stakeholders, getting the parent data, the student data, using a device to calculate that data, because you will need to collect the data beginning, middle, and end of this project. And if you do this right, PTO meetings is where you communicate, you keep parents on board. They are your best advocate. And school newsletters is how you continue to preach the information about why this project is important and how parents as a whole can continue to help the progress throughout the project. Next slide, Kori, if you don't mind. Within the timelines of the grant, and I know many of you are about ready to apply within the grant cycle, this is just a chart form of basically how we rolled that out. You see it was written for a 2-year component in terms of just general large targeted items, but really I looked at more of a 3-year plan and even a 5-year plan, because sustainability will probably be one of your largest challenges. You can build it, you can start it, but if you don't have the people to continue it, then you're going to falter, and the numbers of students healthy, walking to school, biking to school and home will begin to decrease. So you need to be thinking about sustainability over time. I asked you earlier to take a look at those photographs and somewhat memorize them. This is the result of part of the work that we did. By the time the city engineer and I completed the grant project, this was almost $1 million project over about an 8 to 10 block section of our city. So you see that school sign now, there are no cars sitting in front of that school sign. Kids can walk down that sidewalk without the fear of being hit by a car, unless the car, of course, jumps the curb, for goodness sakes. You see on the right-hand side, we now have a sidewalk where bicyclists can travel on our sidewalks and not down the middle of the busy, narrow street. In Cañon City, we have, unfortunately, poor road conditions. And they are narrow roads, very narrow roads. So to be able to visually see at corners, these bump outs have slowed traffic down since the project has been completed. And I believe that this is one of the key things that we can do for our kids and our families to promote healthy lifestyles. Next slide. All right, section 4. Section 4 are the partnerships. So this is how we designed our Safe Routes to School grant. Not only does it have the partners that I already mentioned with you, but look at some of the key gatekeepers that help make the program successful. City of Cañon City, yes, our Lincoln School parents, hospital, any local hospitals, they're going to support a project like this. Local bike owners, our Cañon City Police Department, and our recreation district. We're fortunate. We have a park that is just 3 blocks away, but we had unsafe sidewalks to even take the kids down to the park for large school-wide events. We also have a 8-mile river walk close to our school. We take science field trips multiple times down to the river walk. But again, we did not have safe travel to and from. Now we do. You see on the left-hand side, the Cañon City Schools and community partners that we tapped into because they have a passion and a desire to help our children live healthy lifestyles. On the right-hand side, what you're going to see here in this table, in 2016 were the 5 E's. Now they have added a very important 6th E, which is equitability, rightfully so. That should have been there a long time ago. So I was glad to see that when I looked at the more updated information. So you see some of the activities. Hopefully you can capture a couple of ideas here for your program. You see a couple of ideas here. Our superintendent is an advocate of bicycle riding. He does that during his daily work. He'll go between meetings on his bike between schools. So we tapped into that, and he will be doing a modeling and ride your bike with me event. You will see. We decided to look at how can we implement this program with things we are already doing. If you are going to partner with a school, they are overloaded with responsibilities, accountability, and things to accomplish. They cannot already teach all of their curriculum that they have to teach within a school year. They are already lacking time. So when you approach schools, I highly recommend you do so with the mindset and the filter that says, we are not going to add more to your plate. We are going to ask you, how can we help enhance what you already offer? And a couple of those ideas. Physical education lessons, most schools have PE lessons already occurring. Can those lessons incorporate bicycle safety, for example? Assemblies. Throughout the year, there are assemblies that schools offer because we want to address the student body as a whole. You may have a parent-teacher organization fundraiser event that you want to kick off. It's only going to last about 20 minutes to get that information out to the student body. You have 10 minutes to fill in with a valuable component. Safe routes to school, lessons, and activities might be the perfect thing to round out that assembly. So we chose to add 4 main key components throughout the year in our assemblies. And you see those listed there. If you and your school do not have a do-it-yourself repair bicycle equipment, I put a YouTube link there from our school YouTube website. One of our students did this with our custodian, and he described the equipment tools that you can use to repair your bikes, for example, right there on the school campus. So you see some of the activities that we have. Almost every school knows about walk to school, bike to school. We already know that. Superintendent modeling, taking us down to the river walk and having a bike ride. The one that would be new to us out of this entire list is number 3 that the wellness team is going to coordinate, and that is parent walking buses and bike trains and a buddy program. If you came into my office and said, you know, we believe in healthy living and we believe in helping kids understand the value and the benefits of a healthy lifestyle, can I volunteer to help motivate more kids to walk and bike to school? And I'll even start a program where I pick the kids up and I safely drop them off after school with a bike train. You deliver that kind of message to me and you tell me you will lead it, you will have some money to back it. All you need is my permission, my verbal support, and a little bit of time to partner with me so we can effectively plan it with an action plan. You have my attention. I also want to take a look at the very bottom of this slide right here where it says Walmart. One of the easiest dollar grants you can apply for is a Walmart grant. It's on their website. It's 10 drop-down boxes, 2 paragraphs, and it's the easiest $1,000 if you're awarded it, easiest $1,000 you will have ever received. There's no follow-up on it. I encourage you to take a look at Walmart website and see if you can put in your pocket $1,000. If you walk in my office and say, I have $1,000 already to contribute to this program, you get my attention a little more than the 100 requests that I get already in a school year. We get these requests all the time. You need to bring something to the table that catches my eye and will make it easy for us to implement this because we know it benefits kids. That's a no-brainer. Next slide, Kori. We follow the 6 E's, if you would. A couple of highlights. Sustainability will be one of your challenges. We did get the mayor on board. the chief of Kansas City Police Department on board, and the Kansas City Rec District Director. All of them wrote letters of support. Next slide, Kori. One of the things that we did was we wanted to target in our action plan the kids that lived a half mile, a mile, and 2 miles from the school. These are the most targeted walkers and bicyclists. Every school has an infinite campus platform or some data platform on the data pipeline with Colorado State. In order to download which families live where and who I should target when I have those face-to-face and send out letters of getting those bike trains up and running, this kind of map might help you. You simply download with an ad hoc filter system from your Infinite Campus program. You get a list of the 100 kids in your school that live the closest to the school. You Google or download an app to spot map it like this. And within a few moments in your fingertips, you can target specifically the kids that will help you sustain this program the longest. So I encourage you to take a look at a map strategy in your action plan that can help you target kids. Next slide, Kori. Other people that we partnered with and letters of support. Having a student write their experience of the unsafe and or safe and or the benefits of the program that has been created or will be created is very powerful. So I encourage you to get a student letter. We had a senator, a parent of one of our children, so Colorado Senator letter, getting the neighbors on board because that construction is real. People, that construction project is a real deal and it impacts people that live beside your school. So getting those neighbors to write letters of support we felt was important. And then our Board of Education president, of course. Onward, Kori. Successful or challenging attributes. The grant program from Safe Route to School, let me tell you, they've done their homework and they've put together easy grant writing. Now it's long, I gotta tell you that. If you're gonna do it right, it's long, but everything's right there at your fingertips. User-friendly grant format, the grant exemplars, pull some of those grant exemplars, use their templates. They were awarded these grants because they're competitive and they had high quality grants submitted. So use those exemplars. Leadership, collaborative buy-in, and follow through with the right people is imperative. So be careful and select the right people. They need to have a fire inside their belly to do this project for several years, and then you'll have the right team partnering with you. Challenges, data collection. Now, Safe Routes to School has electronic data collection. We had to do paper and pencil. It was rough. And when we sent it to the national organization, they fell behind with their data results. So we actually had to write a letter that said we submitted it in plenty of time. It did not come back in time, but we've done a short inter-school data collection piece, which we are submitting our grant on still data results, although it's not the full-flown large data amount that we wanted. The bike walking trains, if you choose to do that, getting volunteers to commit to that on a daily basis might be a challenge for you. Rerouting traffic while the construction is being done, you need to think through that clearly and have a plan for that. And again, I say sustainability over several years will always be a challenge. We have 1/3 of our population moving in and out of our neighborhood schools. So constantly updating and informing new families that this program exists would be a possible sustainability challenge for you. And I think we're getting close to the end of these, Kori. Next slide, please. Tips and strategies. You need to find a way to sell it. There are 3 things that school administrators are responsible for: safety of children, educating children, and finding the money to get it done. When you sit down with the administrator, I wholly hope you have those 3 things as a pivotal piece of your presentation in order to find schools that want to partner with you. Use an existing action plan format. All schools are familiar with a ton of action plans. Safe Routes to School grant Use their format. It's similar to an action plan. School improvement, unified improvement plans, their action plans. Wellness SHIP documents in Colorado are action plans. For goodness sakes, RANDA teacher evaluation formats are action plans. Anytime you do anything with student data and growth of student data, it's an action plan. Use an action plan that already exists because most of your audience will be familiar with that type of plan. And once again, leadership makes a difference. Find the right people to do the job. And if you write your action plan well, you will have success with this. Longevity in terms of sustainability will matter. On the right-hand side, bottom photograph, you see those two police officers at our assembly presenting safe bicycle hand signals. The police officer standing upright is one of our parents. His daughter is sitting in the front row in kindergarten watching him present. Do you think he has a desire to see his daughter come to school safely on a sidewalk? Absolutely. He partnered with us easily. The other gentleman was a former Lincoln School student. He sat in that audience as an 8-year-old boy wanting to become a police officer. He has a desire to give back to our community. Top photograph, you see the gentleman holding the stop sign. That is the new principal. Our leadership team at Lincoln School, we wanted the next principal to have longevity. We wanted them to sit down, take a job, and be here for a while to continue to build our school. So Mr. Olguin is going to continue with the sustainability of this program. There he is, for goodness sakes. Safe routes to school, walk to school. He's holding up the sign, for goodness sakes. So he's committed and has a desire to keep the program successful. So I encourage you, light a fire within yourself, within others. What you are about to do is important, worthy work, and I'm glad to be a part of it today.
Thank you so much, Tammy. There's nothing like hearing directly from an educator and a school administrator, since your time is so precious. So we really appreciate you, giving that school on the ground perspective. So I'm going to hand it over to Michelle, who is going to lead us through some other resources for creating your Safe Routes to School action plan.
All right. Thanks, Kori, and thanks so much, Tammy. That was really helpful, and I love to hear all of the tips and resources that you provided for everyone. So Kori shared in the beginning best practices and considerations for Safe Routes to School action planning more broadly, and a lot of examples and ideas. Tammy told us about the process that she went through in Cañon City and the great success that they've had with their implementing their action plan. And I'm going to finish out with some resources, some specific to Colorado, and some examples of ways to help you create your action plan. So Kori gave guidance on what a strong and effective action plan and planning process should look like and include. These are things that we recommend to Safe Routes to School programs to consider and do no matter what stage they're at and where they're in the country. If you're applying for Colorado Safe Routes to School funding, which I'm sure a number of you are on here because you are, the next application cycle opening in August, every applicant is required to develop and include an action plan that guides the work over the life of the grant. These action plans are required to have specific components that generally align with everything that we talked about earlier, even if they somebody wasn't seeking the specific funding. I'll note that if you're doing a bigger action planning process, you may be looking at taking a component of that and turning that into your action plan specifically to go after the Colorado Safe Routes to School funding. So the instructions and examples are on the Colorado Safe Routes to School webpage. Also note that this action plan isn't for this coming year that's going to be starting pretty quickly, but this is a grant that's going to be looking at the 2021 and 2022 school year and out from there. So hopefully that alleviates some anxiety about planning for things during all of this uncertainties that we have with COVID-19. So I'll let you read the instructions on your own, but just wanted to quickly go over the required components of the action plan, broad goals, objectives that specifically talk about how the goals will be met, and these objectives have to be SMART objectives, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. The activities are what activities will be performed to meet the objectives. Measurements, how will you know if you've met your desired outcome, a time frame, and then the responsible key staff or agency that's going to implement each of those actions. So remember that action planning should really be a group process, and as Kori mentioned, a strong action plan is really built by engaging partners and stakeholders who are both going to be affected by the action plan implementation and also may have an ownership of implementing the action plan. So we have some suggestions for group exercises to facilitate action planning based on things that we've done with communities in our own work. So the examples I'm going to share were actually done in person, but I think people are getting really creative on doing these things virtually as well. First is an exercise that I like to do for groups to think broadly about their vision for their Safe Routes to School program. We call it Post-it note brainstorming. Really easy, just takes Post-it notes and pens. We ask each person to write down the challenges around safe routes to school in their community. These could be things like specific streets that are barriers to walk or bike, or access to bikes or school buy-in. So everybody puts up their Post-it notes, and then we start seeing if there's common themes that emerge. These themes help us understand what are the things that we want to focus on changing or overcoming. We do the same thing for opportunities, and opportunities are resources that a community has, or the positives or past successes that we make sure we want to harness and build upon. Finally, asking people to write down on their Post-it notes, what is the vision for the future of the Safe Routes to School program? Here we ask each person to think aspirationally. In the future, what is the ideal community for walking and biking to school? What does it look like? So this is an exercise for each person in the group to get their own thoughts down on paper, put it up on the wall so we can see commonalities with what others are thinking. It actually captures a lot of input from individuals in a quick amount of time and lets everybody see what everybody's also writing down. In terms of other exercises to do big visioning, I would also encourage you to watch or rewatch the webinar we did on community engagement in May for more ideas. A lot of the activities that we included in that webinar are really intended to develop a shared community vision for Safe Routes to School and your Safe Routes to School program, which will help you, directly develop the goals and activities that you include in your action plan. Next is a suggested activity to get down into the nitty-gritty of goal setting, the specific activities and objectives under each goal, and things like the details of who's going to be responsible and who's going to fund it, that sort of thing. So for this, one way to do it is just to put out all the things that you need to know and decide on into a worksheet and start filling out as a group. The dialogue that happens as the group fills in the worksheet and works through each component is just as important for creating a strong stakeholder group and support and buy-in for the action plan as what's actually ends up on the sheet of paper. And then finally, here's an example of a prioritization exercise. If you go through your goal setting, you go through activities, and you have a laundry list that is way more than possibly could be done in 1 to 2 years, this is a way to prioritize and have everybody have input on what are things that are the low, medium, and high priorities. So we gave people in this example dot stickers and had typed up the list of potential activities that were brainstormed earlier by the group. We gave people dot stickers and asked them to vote for what they thought were high, medium, and low priorities. So those were just 3 examples of different exercises. I know there's a ton out there, but just wanted to share some that we've done for action planning with communities. Some additional resources that I want to quickly cover. If you're looking for additional activity ideas to include in your action plan, the Safe Routes to School webpage has both lists of sample infrastructure and non-infrastructure projects, as well as a list of ideas organized by the problem or challenge you're trying to address and the audience you're working for. We also have a resource on our website called the Building Blocks Toolkit, which has ideas organized by the 6 E's, primarily for programs just getting started. And then finally, because funding was brought up as one of the challenges, and we didn't get to talk a whole lot about funding in terms of sustainability, if you want to dig in more on potential funding sources outside of the Colorado Safe Routes to School grants, we have a fact sheet called Frequent Routes to Funding, which outlines common funding sources for safe routes to school, as well as some tips and considerations to position your program to be ready to jump on those funding opportunities as you come your way. All right. I think we have one more poll. If Kori, you want to open that?
Thanks, Michelle. So we have one last quick poll. You've received a lot of information today, and so we would love to know, what parts do you feel of safe routes to school planning? What makes you feel most confident about completing? As we talked about challenges, we also want to, figure out, what's making you feel good or inspired or confident as you move into this process. So assessing the current conditions, doing the strategies outlining, getting the school buy-in, community buy-in, facilitating action planning meetings and activities, or implementing the action plan. If there's something else, feel free to put it in the chat box. Seems like people are feeling pretty good about assessing the current conditions, getting those strategies in place. We're getting a few people who feel pretty good about getting that community and school support, which is awesome. There seems to be some enthusiasm too around facilitating the action planning meetings, which is great. And then, implementing your action plan. I feel like that's always, kind of the hardest and a bit daunting. So we have this beautiful plan in place. How do we make it happen? But we definitely know that that can be challenging, but that it can also be done, and that keeping those expectations realistic will hopefully help make the implementation process a bit easier. So I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll, and we're going to move into our Q&A section. So again, if you have a question and haven't submitted it, please make sure that you put it in the question box, and we have a few minutes to answer a few questions. And we did have a question come in about what are some good ways to conduct community engagement around visioning and goals virtually? Which is something that we're all kind of thinking about right now. I know that some things we've done at the partnership, I feel like we've all been living our lives on GoToWebinar and Zoom. We recently did a back to school working group where we talked to different safe routes to school practitioners from across the country about school resuming and what that'll look like. And so we did a few Zoom sessions. Zoom was nice because we were able to do some small breakout groups. So have smaller discussions about, goals and envisioning and programming into the fall. So that can be, that could be one way. I also know that, internet access is not something that, that is easy for everyone. So I've heard some community members and community partners do, do old school phone calls. Text message surveys have also been something people have been looking at, email surveys as well. And I'm going to just take everybody else off of mute too, if you all have other questions or other ideas around virtual community engagement, please feel free to share.
Yeah. One idea that I have that I haven't actually tried yet, but I would love for somebody to do this is, especially if your school is located in a neighborhood where people are still, walking or biking around, just to go places, go to the parks or wherever, is if there's an opportunity to put up some sort of board for people to write their ideas on as they go past on their own. That might be a low-tech way as well.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, and nice and bright and visual too.
I have a couple of thoughts with that, Kori.
Sure.
Almost every school now has a Facebook page and a website page where you could easily, through the principal's blessing and I guess a little bit of support and help in getting it on there, you could easily put a survey out there to your parents within the school on the Facebook page and website page. Also, the principal typically has some form of communication mechanism with parents, whether it be like our morning Friday announcements on our YouTube channel, so that he could point or she could point to a survey that parents take, and then you have all the information electronically categorized for you. or newsletters, if it's not virtual, but newsletters that go out to encourage parents to take the survey. The other two things I have is some schools now, we have an electronic sign at our school on the outside wall of our school, which was part of our Colorado Health Foundation grant, playground grant for $300,000. And that sign can post anything we want it to say. So advertising on a school sign is a possibility to get parents to take the survey. And then most teachers in our community anyway use a program called Class Dojo, which also helps communicate with parents. If teachers were willing to put a Class Dojo couple of survey questions out to their parents, you would get information electronically back that direction.
Thanks so much, Tammy. Those are some other great, really practical tips for you all to use and take with you as we all try to engage virtually. So we are right at the top of the hour. Just a few last announcements before we leave for today. Please make sure to sign up for the Colorado Safe Routes to School newsletter. That's where you'll get all the information about the upcoming grant cycle. I know Melissa, I just put something in the chat about you, just to clarify, the grant cycle will be for school year 2020 to 2021 or 2021 to 2022. So feel free to clarify that or put that in the chat box. I'll also include that information in the follow-up email. And our next webinar will be on school siting. We'll get the date out to you as soon as we have that. And again, you're always welcome to contact Michelle, me, Melissa at, who's the Safe Routes to School Colorado contact. And you will get a link with the recording for this webinar and the presentation slides shortly, along with the survey. So please fill out our survey. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being a part of this. Special thank you to Tammy DeWolf from Cañon City. Thank you so much for your energy, your expertise, and just for being a really strong Safe Routes to School advocate. We really appreciated hearing from you today. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you all for our next webinar. Thanks so much. Bye.